Hi, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Tricia Friedman. Today's guest is Alex Campbell, a sociology teacher at Elizabethton High School in Tennessee, and he happens to be the educator at the heart and soul of the new special limited series from Prime Video entitled Murder 101. And let me tell you, if you are looking for your next great bingeable watch, this show surprised me. It had me near tears and in my family chat telling everybody, you need to watch this as soon as possible. Back in 2018, Alex invited his students to investigate the redhead murders, a series of decades-old killings that had received very little sustained public attention. What began as kind of an unconventional classroom project has grown into a multi-year investigation. And the limited series captures several things. It captures the strengths of going about project-based learning. It explores what true student agency really is. And it also gets us thinking about what the purpose of school could be. Murder 101, yes, it's a true crime series, but it's very different from most true crime series that you might be familiar with. It's a remarkable examination of teaching and students. Today, Alex and I talk about the origins of this project, the emotional weight carried by himself, his students, and what the experience has taught him about project-based learning and what he hopes it might teach educators around the world about it too. If you are looking for text to use in your district, your school's professional development this coming academic year, I have to say the series Murder 101 is one I would highly recommend. Let's welcome Alex Campbell to the podcast. Alex, it is such an honor to be speaking with you. I have to tell you in all humbling humility that when I first heard about Murder 101, I thought I knew what this story was going to be about, and I was super duper wrong, which was a good thing. I was so surprised by some of the deeply human elements of this story. And I wonder if we can start off actually by you just explaining the initial choice that you made in exploring sociology through murder. So for somebody who is saying murder and sociology, are we talking apples and oranges? Like, how does that work? Could you speak a little bit to that to begin with?
Sure. I mostly teach history. Sociology is an elective I teach. I guess if you've ever thought about history, you learn a lot about wars, it seems like, and people say, why do they always talk about wars? But war has so much human emotion, right? There's so much. The consequences, the stakes are so high. And so I think that's the way it is with true crime. People's lives are at stake. And so I just felt like it just brought the best out of the kids. It really, first of all, intrigued them, but also they realized the importance of it, how it mattered to people, real people in the community, and maybe figure out what we can do to help with some of these really intense stories, issues, problems in our communities. I don't know. I think it's a good fit. Sociology, simple definition, is just how humans behave in groups. And if you look at these stories, the groups that we create, families, friend groups, peers, media, criminal justice, social institutions, the government, all those type of things, they're involved in every one of these stories. So I found it was a very good way for me to actually talk about sociology and make it kind of high stakes for the students.
Yeah, that piece, for anybody who gets into watching the limited series, it's palpable how your students feel about the people involved. And I also have to say, Alex, as I was watching, I'm thinking, this is the perfect example of interdisciplinary inquiry in action. We're seeing the students deal with media literacy. We're seeing them understand how systems work or do not work. And I wonder if, as you look back on the many years that you invested in creating deeply powerful, deeply unique and authentic learning experience, if there's an aspect of lessons that were taken away that even you would say, I'm actually surprised that it went here or that it went there. You seem to deeply understand project-based learning and how motivational it can be. But does something come to mind when you think back that you're like, I'm glad this happened, but I would not have predicted that this would have been a part of the learning journey?
Yeah, I'm really not smart enough to know everything that was going to happen. At first, it was like, let's just look at some crimes. And I know we'll learn a lot about sociology and let's just see what happens. But the thing that really surprised me pretty quickly 8, 9 years ago was how much the students really cared about the victims, the families, the people involved. I would like to say that I planned it to where all that would always come out, but I didn't really plan that. I didn't expect the students to do as much as they do with that and connect the way they do. But now that I've been doing it for 8 or 9 years, I know it's going to happen every year. Of course, it is a little bit of the way we do it. We always start off with the victims and we try to learn everything we can about them, which always personifies them to a much greater degree than what the media had usually done in the past. And I think it just kind of goes from there. The students always begin to see connections with themselves, their families, their own struggles. Even though these women died many years before they were even born, the connections are there. No, I was not smart enough to project it all, but I was maybe smart enough to see it happening, lean into it, and now I can even plan a little bit more for it as we go.
The empathy piece that you bring up, that was really, I think that was for me as a viewer, one of the things that really just touched me the deepest. And it was definitely a surprise as a member of the audience. And you had me thinking too, we talk all the time about schools being a part of a larger community. And I think sometimes we say that and we don't act as though that's true. Can you say a little bit more about the community building aspect piece? Because I'm guessing, especially in a small rural area, lots of folks must have known what was going on, especially after your press release. Is it fair to say that students felt more connected to the community, or that the community in a broader way started caring more about the school?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, I think. But I don't think there's an institution that's any better at separating people than schools. It really is. Think about it. We separate people by age, by subject area. We do a lot of that. And then once we get them all in there, we lock the doors and make it hard to get in. And we really do create a lot of disconnect between the students and the community. I always found that the students would rather do work in the community. And at least in our close-knit community, I always found that people outside were willing to help. So really just trying to break down those barriers. I try to bring as many people into my class as possible, whether that be in person or that be through Zoom calls or whatever we do, and then get them working on real people's problems outside and working with outside people. And I think you see it come through. Their teacher is not just me. Their teacher is a FBI behavior analyst. It's a media specialist. It's a brother. It's a family member, whatever it is. I do believe that's very important. There's lots of different types of project-based learning, but I like mine to be passion driven. So the students have to care about it. Community focused. I want them helping something in the community, and interdisciplinary. I don't even know if there's a problem in the world that's not interdisciplinary, except probably the ones we make up and put in a book. Every real problem, whether it's like what color to paint your bedroom, like you have to have a lot of different skills from a lot of different areas. So I think if we stop using the fake problems in the book, start using the real problems in the real world, you can't help but have your class be interdisciplinary.
And we see through the limited series that when you actually bring students real problems that they are going to be passionate about, they find different strengths. That really comes through. And I think it's really a great reminder to anybody who's not even in education. Young people, they have a lot of agency. They really just need the opportunity to let it shine. They need that trust from some adults that they can handle real problems. And I think the limited series does a great job of putting a spotlight on that. It also needs educators like you who are saying, I am willing to do it differently. I have a hunger to do it differently. And the reality is there is some risk there. To do project-based learning, you've got to be comfortable with not having an exact map to know where this is going to go. For somebody who is checking this out and they're thinking, we have got to do more of this. This has got to be what school is about, not the fake problems, but the real ones. For someone who is thinking, that sounds scary, what advice would you offer them in response to that?
We didn't try to catch murderers my first year in the classroom, and I might have used the textbook for a year or two. But get your feet under you a little bit as a teacher. Feel like you know your curriculum a little bit, and you're pretty good with your classroom management, working with students. And then I just say start small. Just make it a unit. Make it a 2-week unit. So I don't always start first day and go to the last day. Sometimes I do. Sociology, I do. Sometimes I get to know my students a little bit first, and we might start a month into the school year. If I've got some freshmen and we're dealing with some immaturity and just getting used to high school and all that, maybe we don't even start till halfway through. But you don't always have to go big. You can start small, make it something you feel that you can handle, right? And you can manage, and just try it. Just try it. That's what I did. There's also some great organizations I didn't even know about when I started doing this. Buck Institute's now PBL Works. They were there. They got some great resources. There's all kinds of resources out there. Hey, find somebody that's maybe done it before. Find you some books, go to some websites, get you some resources, go to a conference or something, and then start small or start with a partner teacher. My first project in true crime was with a criminal justice teacher, but there's ways you can build yourself into it.
I think that's brilliant advice. And Alex, I know that you're going to maybe hesitate with this next question because you are, sir, very annoyingly humble. For anybody that's not checked out the broader story, I think you might reflect on Alex's, anybody can do what I did. Oh, I don't know it all, but it's wonderful to see you in action in the film and to see what masterful teaching looks like and just the joy that the students have in learning. You even have one student who basically fought to repeat the class the following year, which is extraordinary. And I wonder, you mentioned you've got to have great classroom discipline. I wonder what you might say about the model of what you were bringing and how that makes some of the other components of teaching, I'm guessing, a little bit easier. Because I'm thinking if you had students saying, hey, I'm going to have a fight with the principal to let me take this class again because I loved it so much, you're maybe not having a lot of the, quote, normal disciplinary issues. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, if you can get kids bought in, you're always going to have easier class. A lot of schools are struggling with just getting kids there today. So just getting kids there, making them care about what they're doing. And let's be honest, you've got some teacher pleasers. They believe in the story, right? I come, I do what I'm supposed to do. I get my education. I have a good life. But I've got some students, they don't believe in that story. Maybe they haven't seen it in their real life or whatever. And they don't come to please me. They don't come to make the good grades. But man, sometimes they do come because they care about other people. And I've had some really powerful experiences where students said, the reason I came today was because that woman needed my help. And I always tell them they don't work for me. In a normal class, they think, oh, I got to do this for Mr. Campbell, or I have to do this for my GPA, or I have to do this for a grade, or I have to do this to graduate. But I told them in this class, you don't work for me or you or your mom and dad or your GPA. You're working for Lori Pinnell. You're working for her brother, Daryl. You're working for Tracy Walker. That's who you're working for. And I think kids understand that. Some of them don't really care about school, but they do care about a young lady who maybe has some of the struggles they had, and they feel like they can help them. So yeah, getting that buy-in is very important. Now look, I have kids come in tardy, right? The kids fall asleep. Like it's not a perfect world, but man, having those kids bought in and wanting to help others really is a big help with everything in the classroom.
As you're describing that, Alex, I'm thinking back to there's a scene in episode 1 where students are trying to figure out how they can get a Freedom of Information Act. And it's relentless. And it's one of those situations where I would like you to try to do this and there's not a reason, but I want you to know the mechanics of going through it. You could see how actually if they did not care for the humans that were going to be impacted, it would have been like, this is dull. This is frustrating. I am not doing it. And I think too about just the lessons in civics and seeing what does not work the way that it should, what needs to work better. I think we're having a broader conversation about the importance of a deep civics education. And I think that the example that you set, this is a really unique way to understand what does our government offer us? What do we want to make sure our government can do a little bit better, and to experience it in the realest of way. Can you say a little bit more about just some of those other skills and the other conversations that you were able to have with students? Because this wasn't a fictional case study. This was, as we've talked about multiple times so far, this was high stakes. These were real people.
Yeah. Like I said, part of sociology is those institutions that we create. There's 5 major elements or agents of socialization. And I could talk about criminal justice from 3 different sociological theories, which I think is kind of how the textbook, last time I looked at it, kind of lays it out. But it's better to say, okay, here was a girl who needed justice. What happened? What didn't happen? What went right? What went wrong? Why? Let's look at some cases where, look at JonBenet Ramsey, right? And we've done that before. I'm like, just type in JonBenet Ramsey and see how many websites you find. And then type in Lori Pinnell and see how many websites you find. What's the difference? A man lost his daughter or whatever. What's the difference? So we have a lot of discussions about these systems that we've created. And I think something that the kids begin to understand is there is no such thing as a system. There's no FBI. There's just a bunch of people that work for it's people, right? It's really people. So when you say that doesn't work, or that's corrupt, or that's this, or that's that, it's really people. And Brandon Elkins said it, that one of the biggest things law enforcement needs to remember is that this isn't just another case file. This is somebody's daughter. And to that family, this is the only case that matters, whether you had 500 to work or not. And I think that's one of the things the students have done is we just help people, whether it be in the media or law enforcement or wherever, we kind of put the names and the faces to some of these people and some of these crimes. And I think going about it that way, instead of just saying, let's learn about criminal justice or let's learn about the media, we break it down to, instead of an institution, we have a very specific example, and we begin to look at it as people and the people that make up these institutions.
There are many people who are covering the limited series now. And I don't know, Alex, if you're paying attention to any of the reviews at the time of this call. You've got a perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way, sir. I don't know if you did that, but Variety has just done a great review, and I'd love to quote it. They write, "This is an intriguing and revelatory show about the power of investigation and alternative education. Murder 101 shows how much power we hold as members of a collective society if we only become tenacious enough to ask the right questions." Do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, I have been looking at some of the reviews. We did talk about it as a family, my wife and boys and I. We said we weren't going to read the comment sections, okay? But professional reviewers, I was interested because we had these conversations. This wasn't the first group that ever approached me about some of these things. But when we decided that we might go with KT Studios and Freshman Pictures, we had a conversation and I talked about what I wanted. And I wanted it to be victim forward, not offender forward, which is many times where true crime ends up. Number 2, I said, look, I see a lot of shows and it makes high school look like a joke. The kids are all goofing off and the teachers are clueless and they just can't wait to get out of school so they can do something. And I said, I don't know, maybe that happens somewhere, but I've got great students. I said, I want us to show it for what it really is. And everybody agreed. That's what we wanted. But the interesting part is just because we agreed with that on the production team doesn't mean that the people who watch it would agree. A lot of people are used to 48 hours, Dateline, formulaic storytelling. They wait until the story's over, somebody's arrested or somebody's gone to trial, and then they go back and they interview a bunch of people and they do some recreations about what happened. And you know exactly how it ends. They tie it up in a bow and it's exactly like you want. Would people like to hear a story where at the end, we didn't know if we were going to have anybody in handcuffs? We don't know if there's going to be a trial. So would people like that? Would they be okay with a new way of storytelling in true crime where the focus really wasn't about the victims, although the victims are very prominent, but it wasn't about the offenders. It wasn't even about the police. It was really about the students and how they learn to navigate their own lives through working on these cases for these victims. And we thought it sounded good, but would anybody else like it? And I think what I found from looking at the reviews is that people do like it. So maybe it was a little bit of a gamble. I was afraid people would get to the end and be like, what kind of ending's that? We don't like that. But I think they got it. They really didn't understand it. That the point was, yes, it's a true crime show, but it's a different genre of true crime. And I think people are really reacting well with it. I think people who are adults, I have people calling me saying they're crying. They're relating to the students. They remember, it reminds them of their own problems that they had when they were a kid and how they were trying to navigate it. And even though they're separated by decades in age, they're identifying with the kids and the struggles they have. And so I think it's turned out well, but it was a little bit of a gamble at the beginning.
It's a gamble that I'm really glad you did take, because that piece about the way that the teens come across and are presented is unique. As you said, we're seeing these students deal with very complex, big issues, mulling things over, and then getting to be a kid, going bowling, having fun, eating pizza. And I think that is a great reminder of the complexity of your teen years, but also that all of us can be both, right? We can be problem solvers who are dealing with some grim stuff and then still enjoy being in one another's presence. I wonder, as you speak with former students, with some of the students who are featured in this, if that has stood out to them as well. Or again, if they have thoughts too on the way that teens are typically portrayed in the media, and then how, hey, they were having a different teen experience. Do they feel like that also comes through here?
The ones that were in the documentary series, I do think that really they felt it captured their experience quite well. And that's something else. It's just my pet peeve. I've lived in Appalachia my whole life, and I don't think many shows do a good job of capturing Appalachia. It seems like it's usually really negative and stereotypical. But I thought the students were like the storytellers of their culture and their generation. And yes, it's a beautiful place. I love the cinematography. Wasn't it beautiful? The mountains, the mist, the rivers, like it's beautiful. But there is these issues that are underneath there, the generational poverty, the drug addiction, the destruction of families, and those type of things. But you're getting to see a true depiction of it. It's not stylized. It's not Hollywood. It's just through the eyes of these young people. And I really think it's very authentic. And I like that about it as well.
As I was watching it, I was also thinking about what a great series this could be for educators really all around the world doing professional development. Whether you want to talk about project-based learning, whether you want to talk about teacher-student relationship dynamics, whether you want to talk about student agency, I feel like there's a lot to take away from that. Do you have any thoughts on that? And Alex, please try not to be too humble in your response to this. Let's just imagine a school has said, we're going to take this on as a community watch to do some professional development. Is there anything that you would say, pay attention to this, because I promise you in education, this actually makes maybe a bigger difference than you might realize?
Yes, I'm very passionate about project-based education. And I did not grow up doing many projects in class. I don't know if I might have done a couple of small projects, but I don't think I ever had project-based learning. You do the project at the end after you already did your learning. You don't learn through the project. I don't remember them talking very much about that when I was in my teacher training in college. And I didn't start out as a teacher who did a lot of projects or any projects really. But I've learned. And if I can learn without no background, no history, anybody can if they want to. It takes some work. But anybody can do this type of learning. And I know some people think I'm too humble, but it's the truth. I wasn't set up uniquely to do this. I just said that I could tell my kids needed better from me and from their education. So I think anybody can do it, but I think it does serve as a good example. I have a lot of people that ask me, if I don't use a textbook, what do we do every day? Or how do you get grades? And look, I can't invite millions of people to come sit in my classroom, but through this documentary series, I can invite the entire world into the classroom. And look, you're still only getting a tiny little fraction of the classroom, but they can at least come in and see some of the things. There is some direct instruction, but there's also some independent work by the students, and there's student responsibilities, there's group responsibilities, there's different things. I think teachers can probably make some sense of what they're seeing. So that's good. I want people to have a glimpse of what it's like in the classroom. And look, I don't pretend to have figured it all out. Every year I try to get better. I try to do better. I've got a project lined up this year, which I think is going to be meaningful. So, that's the thing, is you always got to keep pushing, trying. I've got two mentors that they've been teaching longer than me. I think they're probably better educators than me. And before I ever do a project, I give it to them. I say, what do you think? And it's always better after I talk to them and we kind of workshop it a little bit. So I think everybody can get better no matter where you're at. You can continue to work and improve. And I hope there's a few things in the documentary series that people say, oh, that helps me understand that a little bit better.
Absolutely. I hope listeners, many of you, take that up and you put that idea forward to take this limited series as a great professional, but also personal development piece. I have to say, Alex, the little bit of your bio that comes through too about your, it feels dismissive to call them hobbies, but your work as a power lifter and building a cabin. I wonder if, in closing, actually, could you speak to how you are just like this lifelong learner, not the cliche version of it? You've got a lot of other interests. How does that feed into the educator that you are?
What's interesting, after I had been teaching for a few years, a lot of my friends who were educators were going back and getting their masters. And my boys were young at the time, and I just didn't feel like I wanted to kind of take that time away from them. But I didn't want to not learn. So I dedicated myself to teach myself, but not going back to school. And I began to read a lot of books. Some of my favorite educators, I became their pen pals by email. And like John Taylor Gatto, gosh, what an amazing educator he was. And he was very sick at that time, basically homebound. And he and I used to exchange emails. I learned so much from him. Started going to conferences, getting to know people. That's where I met my mentor, Jeff McClellan, one of the greatest principals probably in the history of the United States. And he's still a good friend of mine. And I just said, look, I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn. I'm not going to go to college, but there's other ways I can improve myself. But building a house was the greatest project-based learning of all time. Yeah, man, I used that A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Man, I was a master by the time it was done. But every little part of the house was just a new learning experience. It was amazing. I got to go through it with my teenage boys and my wife. And it's just figuring out a bunch of problems over and over again. And really, if my students can learn that life is just a series of problems that you have to figure out how to solve. And there's probably not going to be a teacher standing over you. And there's probably not going to be a textbook in front of you. And the test at the end is not going to be on paper. It's going to be a different kind of test with probably a lot more stakes involved. But you can do this. Go find the people you need to help you. Go find the resources that you need to help you. Get some people around you that want to work with you. And you can figure this out. And if my students learn that, I feel really good about the future of the world. That's what we need. We don't need more textbooks with fake problems that have half the answers in the back. What we need is more students working on real problems. I've never met anybody that says we don't have enough problems in the world. The world is full of problems. Look around and just find a real one and let the kids start working on it. And what happens if they don't solve it? The problem that's always been there will still be there. Nothing bad's going to happen except they're going to learn a lot. But what happens if they actually do solve it or improve it or help with it? Then the world's in a better place. And that's the thing. Like, we don't have somebody in jail for every one of these redhead murders right now. But every one of those women has gotten their name back. And we do know who one of those offenders were, and we've been able to help the family. And we are bringing attention to the cases. They are continuing to put money and resources into them and continue to test DNA and things like that. We're helping with the problem. So that's just really what I want people to realize, is that our kids can do more than we sometimes give them credit for. And just let them try. We really don't have anything to lose. We only have something to gain. And so let's just believe in our kids. And I hope that is one of the things that comes out in the documentary is, look, if you watch the documentary, I think you'll get it. That is not a hand-picked group of kids. That's just whoever signed up. And look, they're at different levels on their academics and different things, but they all work so hard and they find their own strengths. You mentioned that earlier. The other thing that school's really good at, besides labeling everybody and separating everybody, so the labels go away when real education begins. When we do a presentation and the kids get up there and present, I've never had any of the police say, I bet that kid, I bet he's at this tier in English. Nobody says that. It just, all those make-believe things that we put on kids, they just disappear. And they're all just kids working together to solve a problem. And I love that. And I talk too much, so I'll be quiet.
No, it was great. And Alex, I have no doubt you have inspired this summer hundreds, if not thousands, of educators who will check this out and they will see it in action, which is believing it, that, again, not only do we have infinite problems, but we've got an awful lot of problem solvers that we need to mobilize too. Thank you so much for what you did and what you will continue to do. I look forward to continue to watch all the problems you go after, sir.
Thank you. More problems upcoming next year.
Thanks again for listening, folks. Just a reminder, if you enjoy the conversations on this podcast and you are looking to learn a little bit more with Shifting Schools, you might want to check out our free Substack. AI Forward is the space that we are sharing news about AI that you probably aren't seeing in the headlines. This is also a space where we're sharing ready-to-roll strategies and resources for you to put into action immediately. You probably are hearing an awful lot about the idea of being human-centered in this new era of AI. Now, if you want to be thinking more about exactly what we want to mean, what we should mean, especially in education, about centering the human, AI Forward is a Substack that I think you will enjoy. You'll find the link to subscribe in the video description or in the podcast show notes of this episode. Thanks again. See you next week.